So thank you for coming tonight. This is the North Coventry Township Environmental Advisory Council's winter webinar series. Tonight's presentation is going to be handled by Justin Schiffler and myself, Phoebe Robb. We are both members of the North Coventry Township Environmental Advisory Council. And we're going to be talking tonight about residential solar considerations. Justin and I have each put solar applications at our houses, and we were thinking that with today's rising energy costs, that there might be a lot of other people out there that would be interested in what kind of things we went through. So what we're going to talk about tonight is just really, it's not going to be a how-to do everything. It's more going to be a presentation about some of the considerations that we found when we went through. So we're going to start with talking about, these are the different types of considerations we'll be going through. The first one being solar potential. And what that means is actually how much solar energy your property is going to get. There's a lot of information about how to determine that. And you really do want to make sure that you understand how that solar potential is determined so you can get the best solar setup for yourselves. We're also going to talk about the two major types of applications for residential, and that is roof mounted or ground mounted. And there are various constraints on solar as a whole and on each of those different types. So we'll discuss those a little. We'll also give you some information about what is net metering versus off-grid. Those are two terms you'll hear a fair amount when you talk to people about solar. So you do want to understand what those mean and what they entail. And then we'll talk very briefly about how to determine your payback period. And payback is the number of years it's going to take for you to recoup your outlay for this solar system. There's also two major ways people acquire solar. They either purchase a system outright or they rent it. So we'll talk about a little bit about each of those. And then Justin and I will go through our particular projects so you have an idea of how those worked. So the first thing to think about with solar potential is, do I have enough solar energy hitting either my roof or someplace on my property to make solar panels feasible for me? And so the things you're going to look at for that is, if you want to put it on your roof, is your roof in sun the majority of the day, or is it shaded for a large percentage of the time? If it is, maybe if you have a bigger property, you have an area on your property where you could put a ground mount system because it gets more sun. Or perhaps you have an area you can do a little bit of both. So there's some different ways to figure it out, but you really want to look at where you get the most sunlight on your property. That's really where your solar potential comes from. You also want to know how much electric usage you want to replace. So what you're going to need to do is look at your electric bill, see what you average out on a monthly basis, and how much of that can you replace or do you want to replace? Some people want to replace their entire electric bill. Others don't have really enough solar potential to do their entire electric bill, so they'll do part of it. Once you determine those things, that'll tell you how many panels you need, and that gets into then what's the cost. So I know I've told you all these things that you need to know, but you're all going, okay, well, I don't understand how to figure that out. Well, there are online calculators that will really help you out with this. Here is an example. This one is from a company called Energy Sage. And what you do with any of these solar calculators is you will put in your address and what your average electric bill is. And they will come up with, mostly they use Google Earth to identify your property and look at how much sun that property gets. So I put in my house on this one, and it tells me that I can meet 100% of my electricity needs with 490 square feet of sunny roof space. So this is the type of thing that you'll see. This this one comes from Pico, who also has a really nice page that talks about solar, and they have a solar calculator. I chose these two, by the way, because you can enter your information into these and you won't have somebody calling you. Some of the other ones that are online, when you enter your information in, they want your phone number and your email address so somebody can call you or come out to visit you. This way you can look at these, and until you are ready to contact somebody, you don't really need to have somebody calling you up. So again, this is from Pico's website, and this one happens to estimate the cost, the upfront cost for a system, and how much the cost after the incentives would be, and then a payback period. Now, interestingly enough, Pico's payback period was 16 years and Energy Sage's payback period was 9 years. So the payback you kind of have to take with a grain of salt.
Hello, everybody. At the beginning of the presentation, you saw two pictures. Phoebe has a ground mount solar array, and our solar panels were mounted on the roof of our home. So with the roof mount, you'll often have two sides of your roof, and one could be good, one could be bad. All depends on the orientation of your house. And another thing that's very important is how old your roofing is. If it's shingles, do you have 15-year shingles, 25-year shingles? That's a big factor. Some companies will sometimes require replacement before they mount the solar panels because they don't want to have to deal with unmounting them and remounting them in a short time period. The ground mount things you need to take into consideration is, how much property do you have, and can they be angled the right direction for your maximum solar gain? Now, some constraints you're going to deal with, of course, are trees and buildings throwing shade on your property. We have a willow tree that puts shade on some of the panels on top of our garage during certain times of the year and times of the day. Other buildings can also do the same thing depending on where you live and what time of year. The shade does change with the seasons. If you live in an HOA, there might be prohibitions on if you can put solar panels or what type of solar panels you can put on ground or roof mount, or how they actually look. There are different aesthetics to different solar panels. Your township might have some regulations too, more so pertaining to maybe ground mount solar arrays, more so than roof arrays. Your neighbors' trees and buildings on neighbors' property can also affect that. And constraints could be for actually how they look. Now, some things you can choose from the aesthetics of the solar panels is there's different type of solar panels. One can look bluish with a white or silvery matrix in between it. Some solar cells are all black, again, with a silver or gray matrix in between. And you can get solar panels that are all blacked out mainly for aesthetics. It's not really increasing the square footage of your total amount of cells. It's kind of for looks. These two charts kind of talk about different materials making up the cells, but we just wanted to talk about there can be different looks. Some people don't like a particular look of panel. I think they're all beautiful. Net metering or off grid. Let's say net metering is how the majority of people will use solar panels. That means you do have electric service. You do pay an electric bill. You will continue to pay an electric bill, but anything excess that your solar panels might generate, you get credit. And it offsets your electric usage during the days, when the sun's out. In our township, MetEd and Pico are the electric suppliers, and they both allow net metering. And there is also the potential for battery backup systems we'll talk about in a little bit. Just like houses can have gas-powered generators or propane-powered generators to supply electricity in case there's a power outage. You can also have whole house battery backup systems that can be used with solar panels or without solar panels, or in conjunction with a backup generator of some type. Now, off-grid use means the location you're residing at is not connected to any electrical service. So you have to have batteries to store your energy. There's all sorts of battery types. You get your lead acid, you have more commonly lithium ion batteries. But when the sun goes down, if you don't have batteries, you have no electricity. So off-grid means off-grid, not connected to any electrical grid whatsoever. So the electric from your panels would be sent to your house and used to, for your battery backup system and storage. But you would never get any credit for that excess generation in case you have any. So that's a constraint there, but maybe appealing if you want to live off grid. Just a brief slide here on battery backup systems. There are several, but your four major ones are the Tesla Powerwall battery packs, Generac Power Cell, Panasonic's Evervolt DC system, On-Phase IQ battery. These are mainly big packs of lithium ion cells that are mounted somewhere in your home. Usually they're on the wall to save space, and you can mount several different packs depending on your kilowatt calculated emergency needs or desires are. So that is an option if you, for any homeowner, whether you use solar or not. And again, it could be used in conjunction instead of a gas or propane powered generator, or even with some form of backup generator also.
All right, there's two ways that I mentioned earlier that people obtain the solar systems, and one is by purchasing and the other is renting. So there's a number of good things about purchasing. One is you own the system, so you're going to get all of the benefits of that system. They accrue to you. So the utility is going to pay you for any excess electricity that you generate and send back to the grid. You will create something called solar renewable energy credits, SRECs for short, for every kilowatt hour of electric that you generate. And then you can sell those. They are not sold to the utility. They're actually sold on an open market to companies that are required to have emission reduction credits. So that's in the state of Pennsylvania, those are the market price is currently around $40 a kilowatt, 1,000 kilowatt hours. So it is definitely something that is helpful for reducing the cost of the system. You also get to claim the federal tax credit, which is currently 30%. And that 30% is of the entire installation cost. So it can be a pretty hefty amount that you get back. Now, the bad things with owning the system is you own the system. So you're responsible for the maintenance. You have to pay upfront for the system, whether you do that through just write them a check, or you take out a loan, you're still paying upfront for that system. As I said, you're responsible for the maintenance. If there's a problem, there's not an awful lot of maintenance, but if you have a panel that goes bad or an inverter that goes bad, something crashes through one of your panels, you're responsible for replacing that. And you also have to make the arrangements with utility to connect to the grid. There is a permit process through the utilities to be able to send the electric back to them. And they're really fussy about it. So you do need to make sure that's done. And we had our contractor do it and Justin had his contractor do it. That's pretty much the way it works, but it is still something that you need to make sure is done. And then you or your contractor are also responsible for applying for your SRECs. Otherwise, you just lose them. Now, if you're renting, the nice thing about renting is that there's really no upfront cost. The company that you are renting from, they're going to pay to put the system up. They pay for all the components of the system. They get all the permits. But the bad thing is they get all the benefits as well, with the exception of you do get a reduction in your energy costs. You will still pay a fee, but it will be a reduced cost from what the utility charge you for electric. You're basically paying a rental fee to the company. And that's something that you would have to work out with them in the process of evaluating this. But they're going to get the payments for any excess electricity you generate. They get the benefit of the sale of any emission reduction credits. They get the benefit of the tax credit. So it is, while it's really an easy way for people to get into it, they don't have as much benefit as if they own the system themselves. The solar calculators that I showed you earlier, some of them this particular one is off of the Energy Sage, and it will show you what those, for if you wanted to pay cash for something, or if you're going to take out a loan, or if you're going to lease it. So it gives you an idea of what you can expect to pay, what your savings would be, payback periods. So it's a nice way to visualize what some of these things are. Now, I do have to caution you that these numbers, Justin and I can both say these numbers didn't work out exactly for either one of us, but it is a good start to take a look at these. Now, your payback is actually figured out on, you start out with taking your total cost for the system. And that total cost has to include things like your permit, any type of prep work that was done, whether it's to the roof or to the ground for a ground mount, the system itself, all of the components, it's their installation, possibly increased homeowners insurance. In our case, our homeowners did go up a little bit. Justin's did not, but that's, it depends on your insurance company, and you would have to check in that. So those all go into the initial cost of the system. And then you would subtract from that your federal tax credit that you get. So the 30% really drops down what you have to get a payback from. And then what you do is you look at your payment that you're going to get from the utility for any excess energy that you generate, your reduction, monthly reduction in your electric bill, and then the payment you get annually for any emission reduction credits. Take all of those, add them together, divided by whatever was left on your purchase price, and that gives you the number of years when you're going to pay back. Now, if you're renting, there's really no payback because you didn't have any initial cost to it. All right, that was really all we wanted to go through on what the solar process is. And now Justin and I are going to talk about the setups that we have. This is mine, and we did put in a ground mount system because when we went through the process, we found that we could not get enough generation from our roof to totally replace our electric bill. So we were lucky enough to have a good place that we could put in a ground mount. And as you can see, the side benefit of it is we put it high enough, we can use it as a carport. So our main reason for going with the solar was wanting to reduce our energy costs long term. We know that the costs are going to continually go up, so we wanted to try and reduce that. Also, we want to reduce our carbon footprint and improve our sustainability. Now, I wanted to show you this. We were really lucky because our neighbor has a horse farm, and where we put our solar panels looks out on one of their fields. They don't plan on putting anything in here other than the horses. So we have, as long as they are there, we don't have any concerns about things being put in that would cause shading on our panels. So, and I will say something I want to make sure everybody understands. You really do need to talk to your neighbors when you're going to put something in, especially if it's a ground mount. It's very visible from their property. They were absolutely happy that we're putting it in, but it is something we wanted to make sure that they were aware of and had no problems with. And then these are just some pictures of the site prep work that we had to have done. Because it's a ground mount system, we had to go through and make sure that any trees that we could possibly shade the system were removed. And we did have a number of trees that were diseased and had to be taken out anyway, so this worked out actually pretty well for us. We also then had to have holes drilled. You can see these holes are actually down through our driveway, and that's where some of the poles for the panels go. Something that you don't need on a roof mount, but you do on a ground mount, is this trench. So the trench goes from the panels across our driveway and up the other side of the driveway to the house. And that's where that trench is where the electric line runs. So this is it running on the other side of our driveway up to our house, to the meter, and into the house. These are the poles being put in. And as you can see, we had a really large cement truck come in and pour the cement for it. One of the concerns with ground mount systems is the wind load. You don't have that on the roof because they're much closer to the roof. These are up really high, so we had to be very careful that we have those poles are very, very stable so that they don't twist when the wind hits the panels. And this is what it looks like now that it's done. We have on this side, this is the meter. It's in exactly the same place as our original utility meter was, but this is a new net metering meter. The difference is this meter runs backwards. So what it does is when we send power to the grid, it runs backwards. When we pull power from the grid, it runs forward. So it keeps a tally of how much electric we send versus how much we use. This is the main shutoff. So if the electric company needs to come in and do any work on this meter, they can shut off the photovoltaic system from right here. These are the two inverters. The way our system works is we have a number of panels and they go to these inverters. The panels make DC electric. The inverters change it to AC or alternating current. And that is what is then sent down through the wires to the house. This is the junction box where the two inverters come together. This is a power supply for this whole system. And this is our, what they call the SREC meter. So this meter keeps track of how much we generate. And then the electricity runs down through here and out through that trench that I showed you. So this is, it's really should not be a short-term process to do this. We took about a year to seriously research all the different alternatives for solar power. There's a lot of companies out there and they'll sell you anything, but you really want to make sure that what you're getting is the right application for you and is going to provide you the amount of electricity that you thought you were going to get. So we obtained 5 different quotes, several of those for roof mount, several of them for ground mount. That's when we looked at everything and we found that we just couldn't get the amount of generation out of roof mount that we wanted. So we narrowed it down to our 2 best ground mount systems, chose our contractor, and then everything was really smooth sailings from there. And we actually our final approval from PICO was November of last fall, and we just signed our a contract to sell our emission reduction credits just at the end of February. All right, this I wanted to show you because this is what my electric bill looks like now that we've gone solar. It tells us the amount of electric that we pull from the grid, the amount of electric that we send to the grid. And as you can see, we're actually sending more back to the grid than we're using. So this verbiage here tells us we have a credit, and our monthly bill since we went live has been $10.51. This is an example of the report I get from my system. It sends me a report every day showing me the day before its generation. And then at the end of the month, it sends me this chart of all the generation in that month. So you can see when we have rain or snow, we'd have very little generation, and we're obviously pulling from the grid then. But on a nice sunny day, we are definitely shooting more electric back out into the grid.
I'll talk about our extensive research, but we did jump the gun a teeny bit, and I'll explain that a little bit. Our panels are mounted on our roof. You can see there's 3 different arrays: the main part of the house, the array on the garage, and the array on the back of the house. Our main reasons for going solar was that we wanted to contribute to the clean energy grid. Several years prior to going solar, we had made the choice to use an electric provider, electric generator, because you can choose your electric generator in PA, to use totally green energy, wind and solar energy. We were using Green Mountain energy, and we were okay with paying several cents more a kilowatt because that really aligned with our values, and we were able to, our budget was able to afford an extra expense. It was more of a long-term goal decision with rising energy costs, like Phoebe said, and by the time the panels are paid off, that's when we took out a loan. That's when maximum savings will be, and that will be probably close to retirement age, and any kind of thing you can do to save when you hit retirement, like having your home paid off, maybe reducing energy costs, things like that will help out eventually. And the federal tax credit was a big factor because we don't think we'd have been able to afford the loan without that 30% tax credit. Next. I wanted to show an example of a normal electric bill before we went solar. So if you can see, you have your delivery service, your transmission service, you cannot change. You're either PICO or your Met Ed in our township, and that's basically who manages all the wires and lines going to all the homes. But in PA, several years ago, you had the option of changing who you got your electricity from, the electric generator. We will talk about that in a couple slides, but I mentioned we had been using Green Mountain Energy, and at that time they were 10 cents a kilowatt hour compared to PICO, which was down near 6 cents, 6 to 7 cents a kilowatt hour, I think at that time, 6 to 8 cents. So it was more, but we wanted to not be burning fossil fuels for our electric usage. So this is what your normal bill looks like, and we really want to emphasize in this talk to teach people, even if you don't go solar, you can change your electric generator to a totally green source. So our time frame was definitely longer than Phoebe's. So we researched for a number of years. Anytime we went to home shows, events, fairs, anytime there was solar there. One time, there was Tesla solar shingles. We talked to any solar company we could for several years. So we bought our house in 2013. So, from 2013 to 2019, any chance we could, we talked to people. When we finally talked to a vendor at a fair that actually described the difference between leasing or renting and owning your solar panel, we felt we were really dealing with someone honest, and we moved forward with them because no one prior had ever explained that, leasing and renting, you don't, at the end of the solar year, you don't get any of the payback from the utility company for any excess that you might generate. And no one had ever discussed these solar renewable energy credits that you can pay for every 1,000 kilowatts on the market for people who need to buy their green energy credits. So we're kind of excited that we found a company that actually discussed that. So we signed that contract in October of 2018. The construction began. They started doing the roof work, prepping the roof, December 2018. The panels were actually all up, completed February 19, and the final project was completed July of 2020. Now the net meter was installed November of 2020, and a net meter, the utility company PICO installs. That's a two-way meter. Everybody has a one-way meter that just tracks how much energy you use. But once your system's kind of complete, you get a two-way meter installed at no cost to you by the electric company, so that they can monitor any excess electricity you're generating, putting back to the grid during when you're generating electricity. We got final approval from PICO December 2020, and I am managing my own SRECs. I'm not using a broker, and I set up my account in August of 2022, and I think I have 24 SRECs to date to sell, and I'm still learning that process. A little tricky, but I do enjoy do it yourself and selling it myself. This is a picture, something to consider. They have to bring in heavy equipment sometimes to install these panels. You saw that cement truck on Phoebe's property. We had a big lift here on our property, and like the weight of a cement truck could be pretty heavy and could possibly damage your driveway, or leave some impressions in your yard. Just something to consideration. This little diagram is just showing our house in relationship to north. So up is true north, and you can see our arrays and how our house is facing. This is a picture of the panels that were added from the solar installation. So you see your normal electric meter there, that little round thing. The company comes out and puts a two-way meter in. Below that's phone box and cable box. The 3 boxes above it, those are new for the solar panel. My SREC meter and hub is in those panels and breakers, and then you see your main shut off, the top right one for our system. So we wanted to show you what Phoebe showed you her equipment. That's what it looks like on the side of my house. Now, to evaluate my whole solar experience, I took all my electric bills, all my solar payments, from the far as I could find my information was April of 2017, all my electric bills up until February of 2023 to analyze how solar's worked out for me. Now, the salesman basically said they had to look at the previous year's electric usage, and they can only design a system that would generate 10 to 15% more than the previous year's usage. But the plan was the solar loan we took out, they were going to structure that loan so that the monthly payment would kind of replace our average electric bill. And around that time, our average electric bill for the previous year's usage was $250. So we went into this thinking that the solar panels would generate enough electricity where our electric bill would go down real low. Our solar panel bill would be around, our loan would be around $250. And we'd pay a little bit of minimum account balance and some electric usage, of course. We were a little skeptical of that. Again, we had longer term goals, but here's what it actually broke down to. So if you look at the middle line, blue, that's our electric bill from April 2017. So you see that go up and down. Now in the middle of this graph, you see a purple line. The purple line from that point on is the combination of our red solar loan and the blue electric bill. Now this short period here is when the panels weren't live and the solar company was paying our solar loan. So it worked out in our benefit. So our average electric bill during that time period was about 20 bucks. So that was kind of nice. Now, up until the solar panels went live, you can see the purple square far left, our average electric bill from that whole time period was $231 a month. Now, when you see where that red line really spikes up here, that's when the solar panels went live. The installation company stopped paying our solar bill, and we started paying our solar bill and our electric bill. So if you look at the electric bill, the curve did go down, and our average electric bill from then on did drop $64 a month. So post going solar, the solar panels going live, the average electric bill was $167. So that reduced $64 a month. Now, however, because we did have to take out a loan, it's $236 a month. You add that to our electric bill. Now our average solar loan plus electric bill average is $418 a month. So realistically, we are paying $187 more a month. And when me and Phoebe were looking at this graph, she wondered how our electric use wasn't reduced more. And I'm kind of wondering the same thing. And it'll be something to show this graph to the installation company and figure out maybe where the calculations went wrong. Now, I'm comfortable with sharing that our solar loan we took out, and again, Phoebe stressed, do your research and get, 3 to 5 different quotes from different companies to compare prices and this and that. But we had such good warm and fuzzies with this company. We probably did not do our due diligence of shopping around. So our solar loan was $53,000, and that gave us a federal tax credit that gets spread out between 2 tax returns of $16,000. So that's very enticing. So that reduces the solar loan total to $37,467. And then if I want to take into account that year they were paying for the solar loan when they weren't active, it reduced the loan to $32,712. So just a brief discussion on this. The loan for our solar panels was structured in such a way through a company called SFC in Florida, where they anticipate your solar rebate, your federal solar rebate, getting dispersed through 2 years. And the loan gets restructured after you get those 2 years returns to pay down your solar loan, and they re-amortization of your loan to come to the monthly average you kind of agreed on from the start. So that was an interesting structure of the loan and beneficial, that they would wait 2 years. Our on-phase monitoring system can give you graphs like this of your solar generation month by month, how many kilowatt hours you produce. We mentioned the SREX for every 1,000 kilowatts. In July of 2022, we made almost 2,000 kilowatt hours, in the summertime. So I should have made a graph of my SREC generation. That would have been interesting to see. This is the updated version of that same monitoring software where you can actually view each panel day by day, week by week, month by month, or lifetime or year to see its generation. That's pretty interesting too, to get your numbers. And these are the numbers I use for my generation to input into my account to get my SRECs credited. There's a
All right, that ends our presentation. And so we're going to open it up to questions if anybody has any questions.
I've got a question. What is the most frustrating part for both of you?
Oh, that's a good question. I think for us, the most frustrating part was waiting on Pico.
Same with me. I kind of, because there was these delays with the inverter programming stipulations.
Thank you, Justin. I've got one more if we have time.
Sure.
If you get extra, you have extra solar credits, you've created more and you're selling it back. Do you have to sell it to Pico or can you sell it back to the clean energy?
You don't sell to either. Okay, so the excess, I think you have two questions here actually. So at the end of the solar year, which is in March, Phoebe is going to get a check from her electric generation company, which is Pico. So at the end of the solar year in March, they will take the excess you generated, compare it to what you used, and cut you a check. Now, is it going to be at the rate you would buy it for? Probably not. We've both been told you would get paid a wholesale price. What is wholesale price? What, how much is it? 80% of what we buy it for? I'm not sure of what wholesale pricing means, and I don't think Phoebe is either.
No,
But
we have not gotten paid for anything yet, so we haven't seen that. But yeah, Pico is the one that will actually pay us for the excess that we generate.
Our system will never see that. Phoebe's system has, a good design where she's generating more than she's using. We are not. Now, for the SRECs, the solar renewable energy credits, Phoebe's going to use a broker that's going to sell hers on the market, and I'm going to do my own. Now, that's not, Pico does buy them, but you don't sell them directly to Pico. The broker doesn't sell them directly to Pico. What they typically do is they will bundle them in the thousands and they'll sell them to companies to offset their carbon footprint, basically, on these open markets. And that's the same thing in my GATS system. That's typically who's buying them up. People who are polluting, they buy these credits and it kind of offset their carbon footprint. So it's not necessarily right back to your generator or your transmission supplier. It's on a kind of a different market.
Could we just buy like super batteries that could hold all our excess solar?
You can. They're people who are off grid. That's what they do. They design their systems so that they're probably slightly more than they need, and then they have enough batteries to store whatever they generate. So it is definitely an option. We chose not to use battery backup. So, which the other thing to take into consideration, and to be honest, we didn't realize this when we did it, but if you do not have battery backup, when the power goes out, Pico loses power, then we have no power, because the way the systems are designed is if they don't see electric in the grid, they automatically shut down. And the reason is that when the utility sends out a lineman to fix the wires, they don't want them getting electrocuted by power coming off your solar.
Yeah, but as I mentioned earlier, anybody could have a battery backup system in their house, and they can be connected to your panel and draw electricity on non-peak hours to maybe save you money to charge the batteries. And if you lose power, it'll use that battery power to power your house, much like a generator would, but with zero emissions. And it can also be coupled with a generator, whether it's a propane generator or a gas powered generator. So yeah, and anybody has that option to use a battery, a whole home battery backup system not just solar panel owners.
Thank you both. This was a wonderful webinar. Thank you.
Well, you're welcome. Does anybody else have any other questions? All right. Well, if we have no other questions, then I think this concludes our webinar this evening. Thank you all for coming.